what we're going to do now is to continue on the series of desktop application development, and we're going to create a sales dialog that will be used to add records into the sales record application. So we'll do that by creating a dialog box that will get input from the user, and that dialog box will now be used to add records to the sales record in the database. So I'll run the application so that I can explain further what I am talking about. So I'm going to right click on the sales record application, then I'm going to click on run, and the application should pop up anytime. Here it is. Then what we're going to do is that when a user clicks on the add record button, as it is now, I'm clicking and it's not working because we've not added an event to it. So when the user clicks on this button is supposed to bring up a pop-up dialog right in front of the user, and the pop-up dialog will contain a form that will get data from the user, and that form will be used to send a record into the database when the user clicks on a save button. So if you don't understand, then don't worry. When we design it, you understand what we're talking about. So I'm gonna have to close this window. Then the next thing I'm gonna do is to open up, right click on the com.xyneex.sales package. I'm gonna right click on that, then I'm gonna select new, then I'm gonna select JDialog form, then I'm gonna create a new JDialog, and I'm gonna call the JDialog add sales dialog. I'm gonna click on finish. And the JDialog has been created. So the next thing that we're going to do, what you can see here is the JDialog window. It's a kind of window, but we call it a dialog because it's a window that depends on another window. Okay, so this is a window, and the window does not contain anything. You can preview it by clicking on the preview button over here, and you can see that it's a dialog. I'm going to close the preview. The next thing we're going to do is to resize it so that we can add components inside this JDialog. Now, the components are going to be labels, text fields, and buttons. So I'm going to create a label, and you can see our palette here. We have a J label here, so I'm going to drag a J label and drop it over here. I'm going to expand the J label, and the J label that I'm dragging and dropping will serve as like the title of the dialog, as in what the user will see, or the main instruction that will be given to the user on what the user is supposed to do. So in this case, what we're going to do is to simply say add new sales record. So I'm going to type that, and I press enter, and you can see the text add new sales record. So I'm going to do Ctrl S to save it. The next thing we're going to do is to set the properties of this J label by right clicking on it. So I right click on the J label. Make sure you right click on the J label and not on the window itself, because if you select properties for the window, you are setting the properties for the window. So select the J label. As you can see, when I selected it, it showed this yellow line around the J label. Those are the borders of the J label. So I select it first, then I right click on it, then I select properties, and a dialog comes out for me to set the properties of the J label. You can see you can set the background color of the J label, you can set the display mnemonic of the J label, you can set the fonts, and this font includes font size and font style. You can set the foreground, which is the color of the font. You can set whether it's going to be horizontal, aligned to be leading or trailing or whatever. You can select them. You can see that you can align the text to be trailing, right, left, leading, or center, or whatever you want. So you can set icon, you can set a lot of things over here. Just look around. This is the properties that you need to set and the values that you need to choose. So that's all you need to do when you are setting the properties of a particular component that is dragged on the design. Okay, so what we're going to do here is that we're going to set the font, and I wish to use Tahoma, which was by default selected by the system for me, and I'll like it to be bold because it's a title instruction that is going to be given to the user so that the user can read it very well. And for the font size, I'm going to select 18. So as you can see, as I'm selecting the font style, the font size, and the font, you can see the preview of how the font is going to look like. This is okay for me, so I'm going to click on OK. And behind us here, you can see that the font has changed. But that's not all. Next thing I would like to do is to give the font a color, which is the foreground property. So I'm going to select the foreground property. Notice that it's the button that's here at the side of the values of these properties that you have to click on. So you click on that button and you can see a color chooser palette comes out of NetBeans. So we can select any kind of color that we wish over here. I think I'm gonna go with a green, something a little bit darker. But if these colors are they do not contain the color that you wish to have, you can go ahead if you know the Rgb Color Mixer, and you can choose a color by selecting the sizes of each color. As you can recall in HTML that the three primary colors of the computer are red, green, and blue. So you can like type a number over here, like let's say I wish to have 153 of green, and I would like to have, let's say, 51 of blue. So the alpha here is simply the opacity, whether you want it to be completely opaque or you want it to be a little bit transparent or translucent. In between is translucent. Down here on the other side of the alpha is completely transparent. And again, if you are not familiar with color coding in red, green, and blue, but you are familiar with HTML hexadecimal color coding, you can go ahead here and enter the values. Okay, so but for here, I'm going to select 0, 53, and 51, and then I'm going to click on OK. And now I have a foreground color, and you can see it's taking effect over here in the J level. So I'm going to click on Close, and I'm going to click on Save, and let's preview this dialog, and you can see that's the label of the dialog. So I'm going to click on Close. Okay, the next thing that we're going to do is to set the icon to this J label. So in order to set the icon, we can right click on the label again and select the properties, still on that property dialog that we use in setting the icon for a label. So I'm going to click on this button over here on the side of icon. Then I'm going to choose an image that is within the project, or if you have an external image from maybe an external resource, maybe an internet URL, you can go ahead and impute the URL here, but I don't think that's going to be ideal. So I'm going to select the package that contains the icons that we're going to use for this project, which is com.xyneex.sales.icons. As you can see, that's the package down here in this other side of the project window. Then I can select the icons down here. You can see the icons that I have. You can scroll down to check them. The icon I actually want to select is this plus sign, which is the add button, and by default any user can easily know that the plus sign requires addition. So we are adding records, so that's why we're using the plus sign. So I'm going to click on OK, then I'm going to click on Close, and you can see the icon is displaying on the J label. So the next thing that we're going to do is to add labels and text fields to save as a form for the user to input data. We're going to use JLabel again, so I'm going to drag a JLabel down here, and we should have up to like 4 fields. If you can recall our database structure for sales records, I'm going to connect to the database again via the Services tab. So I'll right click and connect to the database, and if you recall our table structure, you see for our sales record we require a serial number, an invoice number, description, price sold, and a customer name. But in this case, a serial number is usually auto-generated. If you can recall our SQL query that we wrote when we were designing the database structure, on database DAO, then you should recall that we set the serial number to be auto-generated, so the user is not going to type the serial number. But as for the invoice number, the description, and the price sold, and the customer name, the user is going to input that one. So we need labels and text fields for these 4 fields. So I'll have to disconnect the database in case I want to run the application. As you know, we can't have 2 connections in the DB embedded database. So I've dragged the JLabel and dropped, and since we need 4 fields, which is invoice number, description, price sold, and customer name, so I'm going to drag 4 JLabels, and I'll keep them above each other. Then I'm going to drag text fields. So do I have a text field? Okay, we have a text field here, so I'm going to drag a text field and drop on this side close to the label. So the text field will serve as the input. Notice that you can drag and expand the text field, resize it however you want. So there is one trick I would like to let you see over here. You know, sometimes it can be tiring to be dragging and drop things. So if you are kind of lazy like me, you can select the text field and then right click on the text field, and then you click on duplicate, and that will create another text field for you, as duplicate the text field for you. And since I needed 4 text field and I've duplicated 1 text field to get to, I can press Ctrl, hold it, and then select the next text field, and I've selected the 2 text field. Then I can right click on both of them and select duplicate again, and then I have 4 text fields. So you see, NetBeans gives us the flexibility and the ability for us to be lazy, so we can do our job very easily. You know what I'm saying? So next thing I want to do is to highlight this JDialog by holding down Shift and holding my mouse, click and hold my mouse, and I can draw a square to select all these components. Then I can drag all of the components so that I can centralize them. Okay, so that looks pretty good, and that looks pretty centralized. I think something a little bit here will be better. Okay, and as you can see, as I was dragging and dropping, NetBeans also suggests where it will be more appropriate for me to drop. So here we have 4 fields, and for the first field we are going to use invoice number. So I'm going to type invoice number. Notice that I put a colon, and I can press enter. And don't worry about the scattering, we can rearrange that. Then I can click on this and rename. First you click on it, then you pause for a minute, then you click on it again, and you can rename the label. So here I can type description, put a colon and press enter, and here I can have price sold, put a colon and press enter, and finally I'm gonna have a customer name. Okay, so as you can see, the width of these JLabels are not the same. So because of that, they kind of scatter the arrangement that we had, but you can rearrange them, and NetBeans will give you a guide when you are dragging and drop. As you can see, there are some lines that help you to guide you to drop them at the appropriate place so that they can all be aligned together. So that's what I'm talking about. Okay, also suppose you were dragging these individual text fields one by one and then resizing them, like maybe you resize this one. Oops, I'm gonna undo that. Maybe you resize it separately, and then you resize this one separately and all that, and as you can see, they are not the same size. You know, sometimes as you resize or edit, they scatter. So sometimes you might want to like have the text field to be the same size. You can select all the text fields if you want all of them to be the same size. Then you right click on them and you select the same size and select whether you want the same width or the same height. I'm going to select same width, and you can see all the text fields are resized automatically instead of taking the pen to drag the text field sizes and resize them manually. Okay, another thing I would like to note is that since the invoice number is going to be a little bit smaller, I can reduce this one, and I would like the description to be a little bit longer because it's description and it's going to contain a lot of text. I would like this to be the same as the invoice number, so I can select this other text field for the price sold, and I can select the invoice number text field and make both of them to be the same width. Okay, and for the customer name, which is gonna be long, I can drag it over here, and of course you can see NetBeans gives me a suggestion where the description length is. I can leave it over there, and that is the same with the description. However, if you still want to be sure, you can still select both of them, right click on them and choose same size, same width to make them the same width. Okay, so that's it for the text fields for the form. The next thing I would like to do is to get rid of these default text that are inside here, because we wish the user to be able to type the text themselves instead of coming to remove the default text. So as you can see, the way I am selecting and removing them is to select a text field like this, then pause for some moment, then click on it again so that it highlights the text, and I can press the backspace to remove them. Alright, so that's it. So the next thing I like to do is to drag two buttons and drop. So I'm going to drag the first button and drop. And again, I'm lazy, so I can right click on this and tell NetBeans to duplicate this button for me, and I have a second button, so I can drag it and drop it in this other way. I like to centralize the buttons, so let them be in here somewhere here like this. This is appropriate. So again, we have a lot of space here, so I can select the space and resize this window, and you can remove the extra spaces if you don't want them. Maybe there's too much space here, so I can resize them. And if it gets scattered, don't feel bad, just resize them again, and you can easily get them to be aligned properly the way you want. Alright, so that's it for this JDialog. One more thing, I would like to rename these buttons label, so I can click on the button to select it, and I can call this button the save button. And for this one, it's going to be the cancel button. So I select the button, click on it again, then I can type cancel. And I would like to make the buttons to have icons. So I'm going to right click on this other button and go to its properties. Then I'm going to select the icon. The package that contains my icons is Xyneex.sales.icons. Then I'm going to select an icon that represents a save, and yeah, this save dix icon represents a save, so I can click on OK, and you can see we have the save icon on the save button. And then I'm going to click on close. Then for the cancel, I can select the button, right click on it, do the same thing, go to properties, go to the icon, and I select the icon package, select the file. For the cancel, this red X button will fit for cancel, so I'm going to select it and click on OK, click on close, and then we have the cancel button set. So that's it, and you can see in a few minutes I've been able to design a very nice looking JDialog. So on the next tutorial, what we're going to do is that we're going to give all these components variable names, because they have been created in the source. Let's go over to the source. You can see all these codes that are being generated, I did not type them. NetBeans generated them and did a layout management for me. So you can see the variables for the buttons, the labels, and the text fields. And if you are gonna be writing programs with these variables, you will not like something like JButton1, JButton2. That's not a good reference. So in the next tutorial, what we're gonna do is to rename these buttons to give them meaningful variable names, so that we as programmers, when we take a look at it at a glance, we can easily tell what button it is. So I hope you found this informative, and thanks for viewing.